Hi, I'm T-Daddy, and I once jammed Ristic Study into a deck that didn't even need the extra cards, and it didn't fit the theme at all, but I just didn't want to feel wrong for leaving out such a generically good card. And that's the problem, isn't it? Commander should be what you want to play, but often instead it becomes what you're supposed to play. And I think these perfect EDH deck templates, where you use 12 ramp, 12 draw, 12 removal, some board wipes, 36 lands, and a couple win conditions, exacerbate that problem. Now, these templates aren't inherently bad. In fact, they're typically built on solid math. If you want to reliably see a card in the early parts of the game, then 12 pieces of draw or removal or ramp is a way to achieve that. But this kind of structure, combined with most commanders being at least 3 colors, leads to every deck slowly turning into the same generic mid-range deck or combo control shell wearing a big stompy cosplay. Personally, I think Commander is at its best when it's messy, flavorful, and full of identity, not when every deck is playing the same pile of 70 to 80 efficient cards, with the remaining being a different set of large stompy creatures or high mana value permanents. So if you're tired of decks that all start to feel the same, tired of building what you're supposed to build instead of what you want to build, then you're in the right place. My name's T-Daddy, and this is my 6-step recovery plan for template-aholics. Step 1. Understand exactly what ramp you need, assuming you need ramp. Ramp is good because having more mana helps you do more stuff and cast more expensive spells earlier in the game. But you shouldn't just toss in 12 good ramp spells into your deck because someone said so. Ask yourself, what do I actually need to ramp into, if anything at all? My Progenitus deck needed around 20 to 25 ramp spells because I needed 10 mana in total just to cast them. And so that's a deck where I just shoved in all the best possible ramp with the hope I would do things like cast a 2 mana ramp on turn 2 to then cast 4 mana ramp spell on turn 3. Or even try to cast a 3 mana ramp turn 3 and then try to cast a 5 mana ramp spell on turn 4. However, with my Azusa Forest Tribal deck, my commander is all the ramp the deck really needs. So in spite of the high mana value cards I shove into the deck, I run barely any other ramp besides her, except for 1-drop ramp like Birds of Paradise and Arbor Elf, so I can cast her on turn 2 instead of turn 3. What about when I made Krenko? It was aggro, and I didn't have a lot of options for ramp, so I chose to focus primarily on dropping low mana value goblins so that I could simply turn them sideways and run over my opponents before they even got a chance to use their mana. Of course, you can build a Krenko deck which generates mana from your goblins, but that wasn't the Krenko deck I built because I wanted to do pure aggro and not a slower, more combo-y aggro deck. So the fact is, ramp is less about a number and more about the specific plans you have for your deck. Step 2. Understand how you will develop card advantage. Card advantage is one of the most important forms of advantage you can develop in EDH, which is why people often recommend just adding more card draw into your deck. But drawing cards isn't the only way to develop card advantage, and card advantage is not an ends in and of itself. In my Carador Umori Companion deck, I barely run any draw at all. Instead, I play creatures from the graveyard over and over. Shriekmaw, for example, is normally a 1-for-1, but since I can replay it from the grave each turn, it actually turns into repeatable card advantage. Plus, I hate out card draw using cards like Spirit of the Labyrinth and Mind Slicer, so there's actually less incentive for me to just run pure card draw in the deck in the first place. Or we can talk about the Animatu deck I used to run. It ran all of the best Wraths which exist in Esper colors, which is a lot, and all of these Wraths were asymmetrical, because I mostly just played Planeswalkers and other non-creature permanents. Because of this, I gained my relative card advantage against my opponents primarily by simply wiping the board over and over and over and locking their creature-heavy decks out of the game. Or in my Yoshimaru Kodama deck, I run Urza's Ruinous Blast. It exiles non-legendaries. Well, given the entire deck, Sans Soul Ring is legendary, I hit none of my own stuff. So unlike a card like Farewell, which would wreck my own board and cost me cards, with Urza's Ruinous Blast, I can easily remove a dozen or more permanents across all 3 of my opponents, which, by a certain logic, is as good as if I myself drew 12 cards. Of course, I still run plenty of draw spells in the deck, but I don't only develop card advantage through cards like Harmonize. Now, of course, you can still run 12 card draw sources, but if you and your opponents are all playing 12 pieces of card draw, how will you develop card advantage against them? Unless you want to rely on luck, you need to be thinking about things like removal engines and asymmetric board wipes so you can develop card advantage against all 3 of your opponents. Step 3. Figure out how you want to avoid losing card advantage. One of the biggest mistakes I see people make is building decks which bleed cards. For example, people seem to want to run symmetrical board wipes, even when the default EDH deck is creature heavy. Of course, I love it when my opponents wipe their own board and do my job for me, doubly so if I can cast it Teferi's Protection or Heroic Intervention in response to secure me the win, but I think most players aren't intending to blow up all their own stuff. They're just being told they're supposed to run board wipes, and so they do. Same with spot removal. Every time you cast Beast Within on an opponent's card, the other 2 opponents just pulled ahead. And again, I love it when my opponents play spot removal against my other opponents and do my job for me. Instead of trying to force in a certain amount of interaction and board wipes, I recommend starting with looking at every board wipe and piece of interaction which synergizes with your deck. I've given the example of a 6 lineman in my removal video. Because it can blow up a permanent and potentially block a creature and kill it with Death Touch, it can be a 2-for-1, given that most green decks also contain cards like the Great Henge, which draw a card when a creature enters. It synergizes with other cards in the deck and can potentially replace itself and essentially be a 3-for-1. This is different than a card like Beast Within, which is often just a 1-for-1 that also gives your opponents a blocker. In my Angel deck, I primarily run removal attached to Angels. Cards like Angel of the Ruins and Angel of Serenity act as removal, but then are also large bodies that I can use to attack or block with, which is itself a form of advantage. Plus, they work with all my Angel synergies, so they can do things like draw me cards or help me scry through my deck. Or consider Rite of Oblivion in my Baracus Folk Hero deck. I use Treasure from Baracus to pay the sacrifice cost, and then I flash it back for more value. In this way, I run spot removal without bleeding cards, and I avoid situations where I take out the most threatening cards on the battlefield, only to then run out of cards and allow the second biggest threat to run away with the game. Step 4. Consider running fewer colors. More colors means more fixing, which means fewer utility lands and fewer basics and fewer MDFCs, as well as generally having a more painful and expensive mana base that prohibits what you can play. But you don't even have to change your commander to run fewer colors. Take my Thantis deck. It's 3 colors, but I only run 3 black cards total. I treat it like a Gruul deck and just splash black, and that lets me run cards that cost lots of red or green mana, and as well as way more basics and MDFCs than a normal Jund list would allow. Or imagine building Phyrexian Tribal. Many of us would want to run cards like Phyrexian Obliterator and Phyrexian Vindicator, but casting those could be difficult in even a 2-color deck, and if you run one of the 3 or 5-color Phyrexian commanders, even with a mana base that costs $5,000, you probably will still struggle to get the 4 colored pips you need to cast these. Step 5. Have good deck building discipline. Most people know what they want their deck to do, but they get template brain and build something else instead. Let's take Edgar Markov with the idea you will go hard into vampires. But then you start adding 12 pieces of removal, 10 rocks, 8 draw spells, etc., and soon you'll probably find yourself cutting many of the less generically good vampires you originally wanted to play but no longer feel able. Again, the answer here is synergy. Instead of thinking you have to run 12 removal spells and 12 draw spells, I'd start by running every single on-theme card related to vampires which can function as removal or card advantage. So cards like Ruthless Lawbringer or Vampire Gordman, which would normally get cut early on, should be left in, even if that means cutting Phyrexian Rena or Anguished Unmaking instead. Even a bad card like Dusk Legion Zealot has advantages over generically good card draw in that it synergizes with not just the commander, but cards like Folk Hero and Herald's Horn, and so unless I had 40 or more vampires in the deck already, I would not cut it for a card like Read the Bones, nor would I cut a card like Vampire Nighthawk for something like Swords to Plowshares. Keep in mind, deck building discipline isn't about making the strongest list, it's about making the list that does what you want it to do. Step 6. Figure out how you want your deck to win. At the end of the day, you don't win a game of Commander just because you drew the most cards or cast the most removal. And we've all seen the blue-green X player sit there with a full grip, 14 lands, and nothing but vibes, only to fold to a well-timed Alpha Strike. Same goes for removal and wraths. You don't win by being the most annoying player at the table. Unless your actual win con is cast Obliterate and hope everyone scoops, you've got to be aiming at something more. Synergy is great, spicy tech is fun, but in the 99 you need a plan that ends the game. Are you planning to combo off, turn your tokens sideways, drain the table with aristocrats, smash face with dragons? Whatever your plan is, own it. Be honest with yourself about what your deck is trying to do, and don't let a generic deck building template steer you off course. I've seen so many decks that were supposed to win with an epic creature beatdown, but in reality, they play like combo control, just dirtling around until they eventually drop Craterhoof, Terror of the Peaks, or Galta and call it a day. And to be clear, if that's your plan, that's perfectly fine, but if you thought you were building aggro and ended up with Simic Solitaire, you might need to reassess. That's the heart of it. Build with intention, not obligation. Templates are tools, not commandments. And if this 6-step program helped free your mind from the grip of template addiction, consider joining the movement. Subscribe for more EDH therapy sessions. This has been T-Daddy, helping you break the cycle. See you next time.